So tonight's lineup, we have got our usual crowdsourced news event, and that will be followed by our two guest speakers. We've got Rosamond Humphrey from Cambridge Cycling Campaign and Pete Abel from Manchester Friends of the Earth, and they will both be sharing perspectives on election campaigning. Simon, what's the news from London?
So kind of bad news, I think, really. We have the summary judgment from RBKC and Kensington High Street and Better Streets for KNC, which is perhaps unsurprisingly, but rather sadly, bad news. Better Streets for KNC lost their case against RBKC for putting in a cycle track on Kensington High Street, the only gap in a route now that goes all the way from Kew Bridge to Barking, so across the whole of London, and then removed it after 7 weeks. They went after them on the grounds of irrationality. And on the consultation, and both counts failed, sadly. So we're just kind of dealing with the aftermath of that right now. The other thing is that King's Cross, TfL have just today produced a new consultation for one of the dangerous junctions around King's Cross. For those not aware, King's Cross is one of the three junction gyratory systems that we've highlighted as some of the most dangerous junctions in London for cycling and walking. TfL have been working on junctions there for about 10 years, following fatalities there, and have done sod all, really. This new consultation is you could grumpily kind of go meh, and that's about as good as it gets, really. It looks like a scheme that I'd have expected from TfL in about 2010, not 2023. So that's a rather dispiriting approach to danger and road safety and people whose lives are being lost at that location. So we will be coming back on that one, very obviously fairly strongly, to say the least. But we're just putting together the campaign's plan on that.
Thank you, Simon. Right, we are running tight on time. So Ruth and Mark, very short updates. Ruth, you're up.
Very quickly, good news. Hammersmith have said that Cycleway 9 is permanent. So that section is safe and forever, which is fantastic, which means that the Chiswick bit can't possibly come out. So our side is fine. Very quickly, I don't know if any of you watched the APPGCW webinar YouTube on update on the highway code, but I highly recommend it. Lee Day, a lawyer, was there who was talking about specific areas in the highway code which have helped them in getting prosecutions or getting money for victims. Andy Cox was on, who was fantastic. Duncan Dollimore saying that it's just not been rolled out enough, so not enough people really know about it. Edmund King was on, who I find a bit of a joke personally, and Sean Hellman about from the Transport Research Lab about how we change behaviour. But the thing that kind of disappointed me, that Selene Saxby is one of the co-chairs and did her "I hate cyclists when I'm a pedestrian because it's all very dangerous around Parliament." Well, that's because Parliament is really hopeless for walking and cycling. So we need to get rid of the cars there. But I highly recommend you watching it. It's a really good YouTube. And next week, they're focusing on walking. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ruth. Mark, what's your news? Quickly.
Well, it's bad news, more bad news, I'm afraid. So at the budget meeting in Brighton Hove about a week ago, Labour basically pulled the plug on £1 million funding, which would have funded boundary road treatments on the LTN in Hanover, which essentially makes the whole scheme unviable. And then they put out a leaflet saying no more LTNs, plural. They're basically taking the same line that opponents of LTNs to Labour putting in LTNs in London, they're taking the line that those opponents are putting in. It's election time. That's what people do in election time. It's very disappointing. And also they told Damien Hayward from Oxford to shut up and go away, who's a Labour councillor. When he criticised them on Twitter, they told him he wasn't supposed to criticise other Labour councils. And he had to put an apology saying he retracted his criticism. John Burke don't criticise him, but at least some Labour councillors are happy to stick their colours to the mast quite prominently, ex-councillors.
Great. Well, on our rather depressing news update, thanks everyone, feeling inspired. Let's actually talk about some campaigning. How do we change this so that we have more good news in the future. So our first speaker up today, I must admit, I know Rosie quite well. I saw her just a few hours ago. So our first speaker today is Rosamond Humphrey from Cambridge Cycling Campaign. Rosie is our administrative officer and is essentially coordinating and leading on our election campaign at Cambridge Cycling Campaign. And following Rosie's talk for the question time, we're also joined by Martin Lucas-Smith, who's a CAMCYCLE former CAMCYCLE trustee and created the system behind our election campaigning platform. So Martin will be here for some technical questions as well. So I hope you don't mind that CAMCYCLE is chairing and speaking at the same time. But I will hand over to Rosie. And Rosie, I shall share the slides for you and just let me know when you want them moved on. Welcome to Rosie.
Hi, good evening, everyone. And I'm delighted to hear that Martin's able to join us this evening because, as Roxanne said, he is the sort of technical expert behind this. So I'm sure that if I get things wrong, he'll make it clear and let everybody know. So Roxanne's already introduced us. Can everybody see our slides, by the way? Yeah, we're good. Excellent. Okay, thanks. So the Cambridge Cycling Campaign, we campaign for more, better and safer cycling for all ages and abilities across the Cambridgeshire region. You can see there our website address. And we're made up of a board of trustees. We have 4 permanent staff, although we employ other people through the year for various projects. We're a grassroots organisation fundamentally, and we run democratically as much as we can. And that sort of involves just shy of 1,700 members. And my name's Rosamond Humphrey, and the administrative officer. Roxanne, can you click so that... the next, yeah, great, thank you. So I've been asked to talk about our approach to election campaigning. Next slide, please, Roxanne. Thank you. So what do we do and how does election campaigning fit in with it? Well, as I've said, we're a grassroots member-led organisation. We're non-partisan, but we do actively engage with local politics and decision makers. There are 2 sort of umbrella sides of our work. There's the sort of hearts and minds stuff, where we produce a quarterly magazine, which is a really key campaigning tool for us. It runs full of personal stories and other sort of news updates and so on. We run family rides. We meet with local groups to support them in their campaigning for better active travel. We raise awareness about different types of cycle, different types of users and bikes and how they're being used. Celebrate good infrastructure. And then there's another side of our work, which is more sort of technical campaigning, where we're really digging into detail, focusing on how decisions are being made and where we can best have influence. And that involves things like monitoring council meetings, attending them, asking questions. We produce public consultation guides when they're relevant to cycling and active travel. We respond to planning applications, we write to our local councillors, we encourage members to do the same. And I know Roxanne has already going to set up a sort of call out for us to do this around the cut in active travel funding. So we're very focused on that side of things, so really sort of influencing policy and outcomes locally. Can you click for me, Roxanne, please? So CAMCYCLE's election campaigning straddles both sides of our work. And it takes the form of a survey for candidates. So next slide, please, Roxanne, so we can see what the survey looks like. So you should now be looking at the landing page of the elections area on our website. If I sort of draw your attention to the middle paragraph, you can see I've set up that for our 2023 survey, questions are going to be compiled for candidates across different elections in the Cambridgeshire, across Cambridgeshire. There are 4 different elections that we're going to be plugging into with our election survey this year. And that questions are going to be prepared with the help of CAMCYCLE members, but also other local groups, so including Sustrans, Peterborough Cycle Forum, and so on. And then at the bottom of that page, you can see previous election surveys. So you can see that last year we ran 4 different election surveys: Cambridge City Council, Peterborough City Council, South Cams, and Huntingdonshire District Councils as well. Can you click on for me, Roxanne? Thank you. So imagine we just clicked on Cambridge City Council. You'll go into there and you can see that in the Cambridge City Council, there are different wards. The city has a number of different wards, and including Abbey, Arbury, Castle, you can see in the list. And then we also state the number of seats that are up for election there. So if you imagine that we're people who are interested in what's happening in Abbey Ward, we're going to be voting locally there. We would click into Abbey, click on for me, Roxanne, please. And then you can see on our election survey that we have a list of candidates. So there were 4 candidates last year for the Abbey Ward within the Cambridge City Council election, sorry. And then you can see the start of the questions that we were asking them. So you can just see question 1, but Abbey Ward happened to have 7, and they will be different from the candidates who are going up for election in, say, the Chesterton Ward or the Castle Ward in Cambridge. Can you click on for me, please, Roxanne? So, and then furthermore, on our elections page, you can see the candidate answers, and you can see here that we've got a Liberal Democrat candidate, a Labour candidate, a Green Party candidate, greyed out because they were elected in Abbey last year, and then a Conservative Party candidate. And you can see the extent to which each of those people has engaged in the election survey. For what it's worth, historically, the Conservatives haven't had much success in Cambridge City, so it's not a priority for them to engage in this at the moment. So why does our election campaigning take the form of a survey? Next slide, please, Roxanne. Thank you. And click on for me, please. So the survey format enables strategic work for us on local cycling issues. It enables us to really sort of give voice to local people. There aren't ever enough opportunities for communities to share their local issues with councillors. And through the survey process, we engage with the community to find out what's going on for them. That's often through our members primarily, as in they go out, talk with their networks and bring forth suggestions, things that we should ask the candidates about, but also we actively seek out local community groups. We're engaged with residents associations and other groups that campaign on sympathetic issues. So this helps to inform not only our ongoing listening work as a local campaigning organisation, but it also feeds directly into the survey questions that we're asking as part of our election campaign. Click on for me, Roxanne, please. The survey also enables further strategic work for us. Candidates don't necessarily know about local cycling issues, and we want to encourage them to think about active travel issues, those that are raised by both local people as well as in a more sort of strategic area-wide sense. So we, in each election survey, we ask a balance of questions, some that are really area specific, that have come from local groups, as I say, and others that are much broader, relating to the area as a whole. It's important for us to give candidates the opportunity to provide useful, really well thought out comments on specific topical issues, rather than the sort of relatively meaningless soundbitey yes/no answers that are often presented via other mediums that councillors have to communicate with the electorate. So the survey really enables this in a way that simply asking councillors to say sign up to a manifesto just wouldn't. Can you click on for me, Roxanne, please? So, of course, running the survey also enables us to further our charity's aims, in that it means that we can make active travel a real voting issue at the same time as introducing ourselves to candidates and thus sort of developing relationships with future elected representatives. I would also say that the survey sort of fits really nicely with CAMCYCLE's democratic nature. It enables us to help people be informed about candidates' views and what they're offering. And, we can sort of publish comments from politicians in a really neutral way, such that voters can make up their own minds. Next slide, please, Roxanne. So what does it look like then? So here's the key election campaign timeline that we run. In January, we scour local council pages for information about what's up for election, the areas that are coming up and the number of seats within those areas. In February, we start reaching out to our members and other local groups to gather those ideas from the community and to begin to really formulate our questions. And it's a really collaborative, ideally, the more local people engage, we have a really sort of collaborative way of working on those questions. Candidates here are surveyed through our survey on a per ward basis. And so far, I think, although Martin will know more background wise here, but practice has been to have this mix of sort of really localized questions and some of the more strategic questions that we want to ask councillors, prospective councillors. So we're looking to shape very election specific and ward specific questions, balancing that with kind of much bigger picture things like local transport plans, new government papers, new government announcements like Adam was referring to earlier, and also linking with other cycling organisations, cycling manifestos too, for example, Cycling UK. We also reach out to the parties in sort of February, very early March, and to communicate with them our intention to send out the election survey to all the candidates. In March, we begin to gather any candidate details that we already have. The election survey relies on us emailing candidates the survey, so we need their email addresses in order to invite them to participate. In April, the election survey, it coincides with the period between candidates being announced and the election date. So this year, for example, on the 4th of April, the candidates will be announced. And on the 6th of April, we will email them an invitation to complete the survey. And then 2 weeks later, we'll publish their responses to help inform voters. Once May comes, obviously, we have the elections. And immediately after that, we work on engaging those councillors who are newly elected, and we continue to do so as well. And that's really important to keep up that engagement with them. Next slide, please, Roxanne. So the survey is really useful for us as a way of sort of developing relationships within the community, but also good working relationships with councillors wherever possible, to help raise awareness about active travel issues with them, and also to really encourage them to make improvements and be bold wherever they can. So we, can you click on for me, Roxanne, please? We write to them. We introduce ourselves once they've been elected. We commit to regular councillor updates, which aim to inform them about active travel issues at local, regional and national level. We offer occasional webinars as well if there's a sort of big new topic, for example, the local transport note 120, which came out in the last couple of years. And we continue to encourage them as well. So those email updates that we send to councillors on a sort of roughly monthly basis are also aimed at encouraging them, because we know that they're making really tough decisions in challenging climates. So it's really important that locally they feel supported by us and feel that they can work with us. So the election survey means that we've obtained commitments from candidates as well. And obviously the survey format means that candidates' comments are made and then remain in the public realm. So it's also very useful for us to be able to hold them to account. We know that people try to be consistent, so it's useful to be able to remind councillors what they've said in the run-up to the elections. Next slide, please, Roxanne. So to sort of wrap up, lessons learned then from us. I think it's important to remember that we started really small and local many years ago now. And so this is something that's built up over time. And now we're sort of operating across the region, but we are still pushing out into new areas where we have fewer contacts, and we're still establishing our reputation and the reputation of the election survey. So this is a sort of moving project, if you like. So what works? Well, pre-existing relationships with other local groups, so that we have strong local partnerships within the community, so that people who really know about very localized issues can come forward and help develop the questions that are fed to candidates. Pre-existing relationships with councillors also really important, so that there's sort of trust built up between them and us. They know we support active travel, and they also know that we'll support them in the process of making improvements. Also, I would say on that front, something that I've certainly learned over the last couple of years is that when we issue the survey to candidates, we try to give a really full explanation of what it's about, what it's going to be used for, and then that we're really on hand to help them in the process of completing the survey if they have any difficulty with it. And also sort of showing them that we appreciate that the time that they're giving as well. It's a really busy time for counsellors. Local questions, working with those local groups again to prepare these, this really helps us to sort of tease out ward specific issues which, when elected, councillors already know about, and they know that they need to address, and they know that their local electorate really care about these things. Open-ended questions also really helpful because of course they encourage candidates to think carefully about the issues, both locally and in a strategic area-wide sense. The survey format also helps us to link up with other groups, you know, when we're promoting the survey online, we can sort of tag in other groups and use tag into other Twitter handles and so on to extend our reach as a campaigning organisation. And I would also say that, of course, because the survey's been running for a number of years, councillors expect it, and particularly those in the city council, you know, they're sort of coming to us almost and saying, right, you know, when do you need the details of the councillors? And they also know that we'll follow up with them. So it helps to be consistent with the election campaigning. And sort of on a final note, I would just say that it works. Over years, we've had many messages from the members of the public thanking us for the election survey and saying that it's really helped to inform their voting. Next slide, please, Roxanne. So that's it really, just to say thank you and to invite any questions from the floor.
Thank you very much, Rosie, for your presentation. And we've got quite a few questions coming through, so please bear with me while I scroll up and find them. I noted that one of the first questions wasn't specifically about the election survey, so if you can answer it or hand it over to me, Rosie, how is CAMCYCLE funded?
A mixture of ways. Roxanne works very hard on funding. We have a membership base, and so that's sort of just shy of 1,700 members I was describing. People pay to be part of CAMCYCLE and to join us. We also have advertising in our magazine. That's another source of funding. And then Roxanne, do you want to talk a bit about the grant applications and so on that you, yeah.
Well, I'm just very happy. I had a grant come through today, so our Reach Ride is funded. But yes, we work on developing relationships with various funders, grant funders, either project-based, usually project-based. It's hard to get core funding for any organisation. But one of the top things I would recommend is the Big Give. If you're starting out trying to raise funds for your cycling campaign, check out the biggive.org.uk. It's a match funding platform. You do need to be a registered charity. We can get into that in another session. It's a bit complicated, but match funding campaigns are a good way to start the conversation around the need to donate to your local advocacy group. Also see camcycle.org.uk/annual reports. Lots of information there for you. Right, next question about elections. Max in Brighton would like to know, is your platform available to other advocacy groups? Rosie, you may also need to call Martin in on that one.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So it has, it's been produced by our volunteer Martin, and he's done a huge amount of work. So yeah, over to him really to say a bit more about that.
Yes, I did actually answer in the chat, but it is an open source system at the moment. It does require technical expertise to set up and install. I'm happy to help point people to it. In due course, I'm hoping to get some sort of national grant so we can just basically make it as a service. I did just want to emphasize what Rosie said, that, you know, it's very much about getting individual responses, not just sort of yes, no, or just sign up to this, which I think can often be very meaningless. And it's really interesting that, you know, because the responses are published online and people can browse them, it becomes very, very obvious when a party is basically sending out stock responses to their candidates, and we do genuinely get very individual responses, and it's become a bit of a Cambridge institution, actually, I think it's fair to say.
Well, Martin, that leads on to the next question, which is from John Morris, who must be from Hunt's Walking and Cycling Group and has worked with us on this before. Question: how do you ensure all candidates receive the election questionnaire? Some candidates may try to claim they were unaware of the questionnaire if not passed on by their agent. John, you've hit the nail on the head there. How do we deal with this, Rosie?
Well, I mean, I'm laughing, but it's through gritted teeth. John sort of knows quite a bit about this, because it is, I'll be frank, it's a nightmare. We have, there are sort of various online platforms that list the various candidates, but often that can be very late in the day. So whereas some parties will be sort of really organized well in advance and can send us basically a spreadsheet that I can then use to populate our own work on this. Other candidates, we can be groping around for a long time. And even once the survey's up and running, we still sort of consistently sending out messages as far and as wide as we can, saying, please, if you're standing in the next elections, get in touch with us. We're running our election survey. We invite everybody to participate. So we try and be really clear in our messaging that this is an open invitation, and we use every means that we can. We encourage our members to get in touch with us with information about candidates from flyers that come through their doors. We encourage our members to get in touch if they've got like contacts in their own networks, people that can find out about the candidate detail. We contact all of the parties that we can find directly, so we get in touch with their sort of administrators to give them a real heads up about this. So I've already started that work for this year, asking for the candidate details as soon as possible. We get in touch via social media, so we contact all of the different groups via Facebook, Twitter. We get the message out there as far and as wide as we can that we're in search of the candidate details, and to please get in touch with us, if you're standing for an election. I would say that the toughest is sort of any independent candidates who are going forward, where there isn't a kind of obvious channel where we can get in touch with them. But once the survey's out, we've had numerous cases where people will get in touch with us and say, oh, I've heard about it and I'm standing, so can you add me in? That it isn't a perfect system, but that's because there is no perfect system out there that lists all the candidates that are going to be standing for election.
Yeah. And I will add to that, keep at it, keep persisting, because we've actually get to the point now, particularly in Cambridge City, where we've been doing this for a long time. The parties are chasing us. Are you ready for the candidate details? I've got them all ready to go. So they do learn and they want to get on it, and they're talking to all their candidates and getting ready. And a big thing I do is I report on which party has had the highest number of responses in each area, and it gets a bit competitive, because how dare this party be having a higher ratio of responses than this party? So play to that. A question.
Can I just add one quick thing?
Go for it, Martin.
It's worth saying that obviously the list of candidates is published by the council. That the problem is more that we don't necessarily have contact details for them. But if we then learn a contact detail, we just add it and then it issues an email automatically. Another thing just to point out is the system is completely automatic. So once all the questions and candidates and so on are loaded in, everything just sort of happens automatically. So if they fill in an answer, that will automatically be shown online. Things like the percentage of responses is shown. And also one particular feature I like is that there are lots of different ways to view the responses. So you can see them by ward. You can also see them by question. So if there's a question that perhaps has been asked in multiple wards, so an issue, for example, like Mill Road, which we had last week, that covers sort of 2 or 3 wards. So you can actually go into the question and see the actual responses across the wards from the candidates. So there's lots of different ways to sort of see the answers.
Yeah. We might not be able to get through all the questions, but if I don't touch on your question, it might be because I think it could be applied to both speakers afterwards. So just to let everyone know, I'm filtering through, but I do have a specific question here from Jim. Are the councillors in these elections being elected to a council that is the Highways Authority? Rosie, well, let me know if you want me to take that one. I'll take it. Right. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, and we adjust our questions accordingly. but it is still very valid to survey candidates who are on councils that might not be the Highways Authority. They're still involved with the party. Sometimes you've got double hatters. There's still an influence on policy. But also it's just making sure you're not asking a candidate a question, or will you commit to doing something that is clearly not within their power. But it depends, basically. Right. I think, oh, here we go. How do people learn what the results of the survey are? Do you do any analysis of the responses and produce any reports? That is from Alan. And Rosie, I'll give a hint. And what do the public do about analysis for us?
Well, yeah, so we try, because we're non-partisan, our role in this is to simply put the comments out there and then share that the comments are out there. So share that the survey has been, that the survey responses have been published. We do, obviously, there's some internal analysis that goes on for us so that we can be informed about the sort of responses that are coming out of different places and what that's going to mean more widely. But inevitably, conversation takes off by itself. Members get involved online, and that's where the sort of public analysis and conversation can become quite hot and interesting. But we try to remain neutral through it. We put the information out there. Yeah.
But I will say this is where sometimes it can be disheartening if you get some terrible comments on there. You're like, my gosh, this councillor thinks all cyclists should be relegated to cycling through graveyards. But actually those comments make for excellent press. And that's probably been a candidate's negative comments were probably the best thing that ever happened to our survey, because I think it got picked up in the national press and made it very popular and so on. So the press, bloggers, other people do our analysis for us. We don't need to do anything.
Yes,
Martin?
I think the day after a particular UKIP candidate posted something, I noticed the following day there was we had 20,000 hits that day, so it did certainly spread. Just in closing, I just want to add one quick thing also, is that a very useful thing that we try to do is to subtly position the view of the campaign group in the questions. So, for example, we've tended to include a question about, do you agree with our policy on responsible and legal cycling? So, in other words, it's sort of almost starting from the start, saying, we're a responsible group, and sort of setting ourselves as that, rather than letting them kind of assume that we're, a sort of like without kind of, all the kind of assumptions that some people make. So, I think there's lots of ways in which it can be sort of used to kind of get the message out without obviously want to avoid leading questions, but yeah.
And I would just add to what Martin said there, that one of the things that the election survey enables us to do is to ask questions that involve links to documents that we really think that candidates should be familiar with. And so we can work those documents into the wording of the question in a way that means that in order to answer the question, they really need to get informed about some of the broader issues in active travel and cycling specifically, which is a really valuable way, obviously, of making sure that our elected representatives are as informed as possible.
Excellent. There are a few more questions in there, but I want to make sure we give Pete plenty of time. But I have noted some of them, and let's see what happens after Pete's presentation and see if we can cover off anything that applies to both. So, Rosie, thank you so much. Martin, thank you for sharing your expertise. I feel like we could probably delve in very deep and take people on quite a technical journey, but I will say CAMCYCLE is always here to share our knowledge and resources as much as we can to help other groups. So thank you for sharing this evening. Pete, over to you. Pete Abel from Manchester, Friends of the Earth, talking about the election campaigning you're doing up north. Thank you.
Hi, okay, hopefully everyone can hear me. My name is Pete Abel. I'm a volunteer with Manchester Friends of the Earth. Unfortunately, we don't have any paid staff. What we have been doing though for a fair few years, not as long as CAMCYCLE, but nationally Friends of the Earth have been asking their groups to take part in local elections around organising hustings or lobbying councillors. We're not moving. My slides are not. What slide can you see? I knew this would happen.
It looks like we might just be on the first page still.
Yeah, it's not moving down. I'm gonna just stop sharing and try again.
I will let everyone know we tested this. It did
Yeah.
work before. We did everything we
did
could.
test it, and it doesn't work.
There's always something.
Let's try again. Let's start sharing. And how about now? Right, that's better, I think.
Yes.
So what I'm going to be talking about is the election survey we did last year, but we've been doing them for about 8 years, although the various platforms we've used have changed over the years. We do take a slightly different approach to CAMCYCLE in that we do go for a yes, no, and undecided, but we also give every candidate an open text box. Because we're comparing across the whole of the council areas, we wanted to do something that did allow us to do fairly simple kind of percentage responses. Also, as is obvious with Friends of the Earth, we're not in a sense simply a cycle campaign organization. So we do ask a range of questions each year around the whole kind of area covered by Friends of the Earth. So that could well be climate action plans, sustainable transport. Clearly, in the last couple of years, Greater Manchester's been talking about bus franchising, so that's been in there. It does include active travel questions, but also planning issues, building standards, pavement, parking, everything. So we have about 10 to 12 questions each year, and they do change. It's kind of been touched on by Rosie a bit, but we do get asked, why do you bother? But it does give us X opportunities, and I won't go through all these. I can share the slides to be sent out afterwards, but it allows us to make contacts with people. And also one thing that I don't think was touched on is even if people aren't elected to a council position, a lot of them are actually very active in their own political parties. So you are engaging with kind of key political activists. And part of the role is, as mentioned earlier, an opportunity to educate council candidates, because we kind of assume councillors know everything and they don't. So our questions are always framed, and I'll come this a bit later on, but they're always framed about a question, but also a link to a briefing document, either a Friends of the Earth one or Living Streets, or a good briefing document. So if a candidate's really interested, they can follow it through. And we've had quite a few responses over the years, people saying, I didn't know anything about that. Thanks for the briefing. So our structure is much simpler, I think, than CAMCYCLE's. Essentially, we sort out 12 questions. We're in the process now of reaching out to different groups like Living Streets or others, so we can align our questions also with national organisations. So we've got a question about divestment, because unfortunately Greater Manchester has the single largest pension fund in the local authority sphere, but also it has the single largest investments in fossil fuel companies. So there's a national campaign that we align the question with. But more simply, it's a Google form for candidates to complete. We have a Google sheet which compiles the details of who their candidates are. We have a response Google sheet. And the WordPress, which if you look at that link, you'll see how we do it. One thing I was interested in is we don't automatically make the response live. We actually check it before, and perhaps we're a little bit too worried, but we're worried that there's nothing to stop someone, in a sense, hacking a response and claiming to be someone they're not. So we ask them to provide us with an email address, and it may not be their official one, but if we look at the responses and think, that's a bit weird, we will contact them. It's only happened once so far over the last 8 years, but we're wary of making a response live automatically, so we actually have a person in the loop. To give you an idea of the scale of Greater Manchester, though, the last couple of years, local election, we've had over 1,000 candidates to try and find. And there'll probably be more this year because of boundary changes. Both Oldham and Trafford are all up, as in all councillor seats are up for election. So we'll probably push about 1,100, 1,200 candidates. And I can only reiterate the previous comments about how hard it is to find them. So we go the same route where we can find contact details, be that an email or Facebook or Twitter. We will contact the candidates directly 3 times over that period, starting from the 4th of April. We actually run up until the Monday before the election, and we put out a press release with the results on the Monday just before the election. Where we can find Twitter handles, we put it on our webpage. So when you look at the ward and your candidates, if we found a Twitter handle for them, people can click on it and tweet their candidates basically with a question and a link to the survey. We email the local political parties 3 times over that period. We Facebook message them and tweet at them all if we've got them. The question earlier about how do you contact them? Well, that's how we do it. But also we keep a record of when we've contacted them, and we have had candidates in the past, even though they've been tweeted, and you can see it on their Twitter history, that they've been tweeted, and they'll go, well, you didn't tell me. And it's like, well, hello. So, you know, if we Facebook them, we record the time and date, if, you know, on their system, etc., etc. So when candidates come back and say, well, you didn't tell me, but equally, if you haven't got contact details, and I can't believe it's 2023 and there's no legal requirement for any candidate to actually give you an email address. And we certainly can't afford to post letters to every candidate across Greater Manchester, but also for good reasons, some candidates withhold their address anyway. So, you know, we do what we can, but that's why we contact the political parties and say, can you please pass this on to your candidates? If they choose not to, or the candidates don't respond, there's not much more we can do. This gives you an idea of how it's laid out on our website. So you can see there's a couple of wards in Manchester. You can click on the other tabs and it does the same for the other 9 regions. If they've responded, they go green, and you can click on it and see their full response, which you can see to the right. So you can see that they've said yes, but they've also taken the opportunity to add a little bit of text. Some people write nothing, some people write screeds, their choice. But all this remains on the website post the election, but also anyone who's voting in Ancoats and Beswick or any of the other GM wards can see who has or hasn't responded. And you can see that there's the Twitter link to Melvin, who stood last year in Ardwick. And so not now, but if you'd wanted to at the time, you could tweet them and say, hello, I'm a constituent, please tell me the answers. And here's more detail. So it gives you an example of a question we asked last year around whether you would support a ban on pavement parking. There's a little bit of background info, and then a link to a Living Streets policy statement on pavement parking if the candidate's interested, or if indeed the constituent, the voter, is interested. And so there you can see across Greater Manchester the breakdown by responses by party to that question. And also, it helps us to lobby and other people lobby. So some of these points have already been made, but we use social media. So if we've got a tweet by an air pollution grouping, we can tag on the results from Greater Manchester. The one thing I will focus on is I know it says vote green, it's not the only party and we are politically impartial, but what was interesting about that tweet in the middle was people who wanted to vote in Levenshulme in Manchester, they were thinking about voting green, and one of them basically said, well, I can't, there's no information about them. And so, parties need to be aware that people are looking for information on them, and they will vote for them if they give them the information they want. So we've done the role of trying to encourage the parties to respond because people want to know. And one thing I should have said is we ask candidates not to give us the manifesto line. We actually ask what they think. What is their view? And it was mentioned already, some of the parties do send out kind of stock answers, and we can't stop them doing that, but we do say, well, we're not interested in your manifesto per se, we're interested in what everyone can read the manifesto if they want to, but what's your view on this issue? And thanks for listening, happy to take questions, but also this was one of my, I guess probably my favorite response last year. I won't say who it was or which the party was, but we have a thing in Greater Manchester where we run what we call carbon literacy training for all councillors and business people and what have you. So he doesn't take courses run by lunatics, and he doesn't think we should have a zero carbon standard for all new buildings because it's silliness. So the only reason I put it in, it made me laugh when it came through, but also it shows the broad spectrum of responses we get from candidates. And that's me.
Brilliant, Pete. Thank you so much. I found it interesting to see the similarities and then also the differences between CAMCYCLE's approach. And I hope that for people here today and watching later on, you can find somewhere along that spectrum the approach that works for your resources and I guess the political situation that you have in front of you. We have some questions coming through, so I'll invite others to put in your questions for Pete. What have I got here? I'm getting some very interesting questions about train platforms in Manchester, but I'm not asking questions that aren't related to the to election campaigning. So I'll be skipping those questions. Sorry. So what else have I got? I'm going to go to another question that came up, which wasn't about Metrolink, which is a bit Ruth asked earlier to Rosie, but I purposely saved it for both of you, which was about how do you avoid just being seen as cyclists or irrelevant or an annoying group? How what are the things that you do to be taken seriously by the candidates? And I'm sorry, I'm definitely paraphrasing there because I can't see the question in front of me, but you may have seen the question, Pete. Could you elaborate?
Well, in a sense, the question doesn't purely apply around cycling for us because we ask a broader range of questions, but we still have the same issues of you're just the fluffy environmentalist. Why should we bother? There isn't a simple answer, but it is that longer term discussion with parties and candidates around. That's why I use that example from the Green Party about people saying, well, I'd like to vote for you, and it could be any candidate, any party, but tell me what you stand for. And so it is going to people saying, well, this is beneficial to you as well. Obviously, if you're a party that is diametrically opposed to everything we're asking, probably not the best incentive to respond. But the reason I included some of the a viewpoint is conservative politicians don't answer, but they do. And they sometimes are supportive, and equally other parties are not necessarily supportive. We've asked, I see a question in there about the airport. Won't go there, but we have asked questions about the ownership of Manchester Airport and its impact on the climate targets. So, and that isn't necessarily a party issue, party political issue. You'll get different views from different parties. So there isn't a simple answer, but you just have to keep going and hope that over time you get to them to see the importance of it.
Thank you, Pete. I'm sorry about the flying dog in my screen. Just scared the life out of me. Rosie, would you like to add anything to how do we, I guess, be taken seriously and avoid any sort of anti-cycling, anti-environment, anti-leftist, anti-woke rhetoric? Have I covered all the topics that might be thrown at us? Rosie.
Well, I'm not sure that we do avoid all of that. I mean, somebody was asking about was sort of making the point in the chat that that because there are really high numbers of cyclists in Cambridge, that anti-cycling rhetoric wouldn't be tolerated, but that's really not the case. And we've been in a very sort of toxic environment on this front for a number of months now around some proposed changes to our transport system here. I would say in terms of one of the most important things that I think we do is that engagement with local groups that are not necessarily cycling groups. This is about people moving around the city and feeling safe in doing so. So this is about people walking. This is about people who push out their parents in wheelchairs. This is about, all kinds of people who've got difficulties with moving around in a way that feels safe and pleasant. And that engagement with those groups is really important, I think, for making sure that we are the sort of the hard cyclist image is just softened, and that we're seen as really caring about accessibility and all sorts of sort of other related issues. I think that for me is the key thing that we do. And the more we can do it, the more we can delve into other local groups, the better, really.
I'd agree with that. I mean, I think the key, which relates a bit what I said earlier, is to to carefully target the questions in a way that basically get subtly comes across as, we're a responsible group, we're interested in disabled access, all these kinds of things. So essentially it then becomes very difficult for the candidates to kind of answer back when everyone can just read on the page, well, we've said, responsible cycling and so on. So yeah.
Okay, here we go. So we've had some questions, and I think it'll be interesting to contrast the different organizations here. There were a lot of questions about, is it possible to do this kind of survey without paid staff that CAMCYCLE has? So Pete, how do you, and then following up with a question about how do you keep your volunteers motivated? So Pete, you do this all with volunteers. Can you talk how do you resource this?
Yeah, we don't have any paid staff, so it's all volunteer led. Pizza would be no. Well, it's something that the group supports, so therefore we do it. It can be soul destroying if you don't get responses, but if it's a good, we think it's a good campaigning strategy and approach. Because if nothing else, we have had exec members actually make quite good public statements in their responses ahead of other things they've said, or have actually changed direction in response to survey questions and or lobbying from local people. But also it's really useful to have a list of allies post-election to follow, and it was already mentioned from CAMCYCLE, it's about following up and using it. So you just have to do it. You do as much as you can. Is it a lot of time? Yes. Is it probably well spent? Yes. We don't have a choice. We do it as volunteers or we don't, and that's a decision we take every year about, are we going to do it again? And the answer is usually yes. There may come a time when the people who are doing it go, I had enough of this, time for something else, but not this year. We're going to do it.
Yeah. And actually I'm seeing a few other groups saying they've done election surveys. So if you're representing a group that does an election survey, if you're involved, please put it in the chat, because I think it will help motivate others to see who else out there is doing something like this. Perhaps pop a link into what you did last year so we can take a look. Rosie, I'm going to jump the gun and say, even with paid staff, CAMCYCLE couldn't do this without our volunteers. Can you share a bit more about the CAMCYCLE experience?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, as the architect of this, Martin Lucas Smith has been and is still a volunteer on this, and he provides, obviously he's provided the infrastructure that we can use to make this work, but also he provides tech support if something isn't working, or and so on, but also people like John Morris, who we heard from earlier, asking a question about how we get contact details. I mean, we really do rely on our volunteers to go out and not only help gather candidate details if the party agents have not been very forthcoming with candidate contact details, but we also are really reliant on volunteers to help shape those questions. So this is really about making sure that we have those kind of pre-established relationships with groups of local volunteers who are campaigning on that with their own agendas, that we can sort of tap into and invite them to participate in the formulation of these questions for the survey. So actually there's a huge amount of volunteer work that goes into CAMCYCLE's election survey as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, have we got any more questions, or are we naturally coming to the end of our chat today? Let's have a look. I'm seeing we've had surveys by Push Bikes Birmingham. We've had some in Brighton. Excellent. Some more coming through from Sustrans in Birmingham as well. So I guess my other question then to the audience is, who is inspired to try one this year, or maybe next year if this year feels a bit too late for you? Have Pete and Rosie inspired you to take it up, or maybe scared you off it, perhaps? Other than that, it seems to me like it's a good time to call our meeting to an end. Any final comments from anyone about any of the issues we've touched on today? Any good news we can finish off with? Pete's got a hand up. Oh no,
No.
Pete is moving to someone. Rosie's
Yeah, someone's just come in the room. Sorry.
Excellent. So I will say thank you so much to our guest speakers and everyone who's participated today, especially those who've had to put their children in a room with Bluey for an hour so we could have their time. As always, thanks for joining Active Travel CAF. I know I meant to tell you who the speaker is next week, but I forgot to bring that up in front of me. So please take a look at our website where there will be plenty more information. Other than that, thanks everyone. See you next week. Bye.